My name is Julian de Salaberry. I'm the CEO and the founder of Galen Growth. I have pleasure in being joined today by Sarah Schmachtenberg, who will introduce herself quickly at the beginning of her briefing. Galen Growth is the global leader in digital health private market data and analytics. We power all of our solutions using that data, including the research that is being showcased today. But we also have numerous solutions that we use to work very closely with large corporations in many verticals and investors to help them execute their digital health strategy, be it an investment one or be it a partnership one. The research that you have in front of you is part of a broad set 12-month program of research. It's either biannual as per this type of report, which focuses very much on the key trends of the four principal regional ecosystems of the world, so North America, Western Europe, the Middle East, including Israel, and Asia Pacific. During the course of the H2, we will be adding Latin America, and that will give you pretty much the entire world of digital health ecosystems. We also have thematic reports, which are published monthly. Those are available on our website again. Just visit our research page, where you will find thematic reports on oncology, on mental health, on remote patient monitoring, all of the hot topics that are keeping most decision makers in investment institutions and in large corporations awake at night as they try to work out where to place their bet. So our topic today, as I just mentioned, is on North America. And so without delaying any further, let me introduce Sarah Schmachtenberg, who is our global lead for analytics and research, focusing on the US, North America, and Europe. Sarah, over to you.
Thanks, Julian. And thank you all for joining us today. I look forward to telling you about digital health in North America. As Julian mentioned, I am head of analytics, data and analytics for Europe and the United States. I've been with Galen Growth for a year now, and my background is in medical devices and working for startups within the medical device industry. So I look forward to introducing you and to tell you a little bit about the North American digital health market. Okay, first we are going to look at the ecosystem in digital health in North America, and you can see where the ventures are, what they're up to. Looking at second, the investment trends and what's going on in the investment, and then we will move beyond investment and look at digital health clusters, categories, and how we segment the market and can gain ecosystem insights out of the different cluster segmentation. Then we'll look at therapeutic focus areas. And finally, we will deep dive into the top cluster and the top therapeutic focus area for H1 2021. As far as the noteworthy deals, exits, investors, and partnerships, I'm going to leave that to you to check out on your own. Those are lists of what's going on, and you can find those in our report, which I hope you've downloaded already. If you haven't, go to our research page, galengrowth.com/research, and download this report so you have a copy for yourself. It's a free report, so we hope that you can all download that successfully. Okay, so let's jump in. North America has been busy in digital health in the first half of 2021. $14.68 billion of total funding were deployed across 351 deals in the first half of the year. That is an incredible amount of funding, absolutely breaks every record globally and as far as we've recorded in the history of digital health, right? Looking closer into that number. So the lime green bar, you see that $14.68 billion of funding for North America. And we can compare that to other regions across the globe. That number was $3.98 billion in APAC, $2.41 billion in Europe, and $728 million in Middle East, including Israel. Now, what you'll see is for each from 2017 to 2021, the first half funding has been increasing year on year, and 2021, then there was a big jump globally in digital health funding. If we want to dig a little bit more into North America, what you see is that of that total funding, 0.4% of the funding went to Canada. So less than 1% of the funding is going to Canadian ventures. And we'll talk a little bit more about that during the webinar as to why that is. 40% of the funding went to ventures in California. 28.4%, about 30% of the funding was distributed in New York and 13% in Massachusetts. So California, New York, Massachusetts are the biggest markets, the home to the ventures receiving the most amount of funding in the first half of 2021. And of course, we were very happy to welcome Canada into our database and to include them starting this spring, so that we could start understanding the ventures in Canada. There are a lot of great promising ventures there, and we're glad to be able to start following those within Galen Growth's digital health venture intelligence database called Health Tech Alpha. We not only look at funding in Galen Growth, but what we do is we record ventures. We, of course, understand the funding that they're getting, but we go deeper than that. We understand the regulatory approvals and that the ventures are receiving or that they've applied for. We look at their clinical data, and you'll see that we also look at partnerships that they have and their products. So the regulatory overview for the first half of 2021, you'll see in the list North American digital health ventures. 13 ventures received regulatory approvals, or if you want to call them, regulatory approvals, clearances, notifications with the FDA in the first half of 2021. They were actually beat by European ventures with 17 CE markings in the first half of the year, and Asian Pacific ventures received 14 regulatory approvals throughout different Asian regulatory bodies. There are many there. So although North America was actually at the bottom of the list above Middle Eastern ventures, they're all in the same category or the same range with Europe and Asia Pacific. And the reason for that kind of difference in regulatory approvals is that not all digital health ventures require regulatory approvals. That's quite obvious to you, I'm sure. But in the pie chart we have on the right, on the ring, you'll see these approvals, the split by venture clusters and medical diagnostics, right, which includes medical imaging, diagnostic tools, genomic-related diagnosis, liquid biopsy. The ventures focusing on medical diagnostics receive the most approvals in the first half of the year. Patient solutions is another cluster that requires a significant amount of regulatory approvals for their solutions, and remote monitoring for remote monitoring devices, right? Not all clusters require regulatory approval, but these are the big clusters that we see that need regulatory approval for their solutions. And as the ventures receive more funding, they're able to collect more clinical data and increase their number of approvals. So it's exciting to see that ventures are moving ahead in that area. As far as regulatory approvals, it's also promising to see that within the US, the FDA has now opened up their breakthrough device designation, and we saw several ventures receiving breakthrough device designation in the first half of the year. Those aren't included in the 13 ventures you see here, but that is a way that the FDA is realizing and acknowledging the fact that digital health solutions need perhaps they need to be treated differently. They're not the same as a regular medical device. They're different. They have unique needs. They have unique features, which the FDA may not have the ways to correctly measure, right? Measure the effectiveness of those ventures. Having worked for a medical device company in the past, I know we were trying to get an app connected to a device, and the FDA were very careful, very safe in reviewing that device and that app. but it was clear that it had to be treated differently. So we really acknowledge and we applaud more or less the FDA for opening up this different pathway, and we look forward to seeing what comes out of it. And I think a lot of ventures will take advantage of this ability to be able to work with the FDA a little more closely and bring their devices onto the market. We also at Galen Growth strongly believe that partnerships that ventures create with other ventures, as well as with enterprise, with hospitals, with different organizations, are very important both for the growth of the venture and getting their solutions onto the market. But on the flip side, we oftentimes look at enterprise, we look at pharma companies, biotech, medtech companies, and we can evaluate their portfolio and their partnerships to tell them perhaps where their portfolio has the strengths and weaknesses. And one of the big services that Galen Growth provides, we can help a pharma company understand the ecosystem of digital health ventures, what's going on, where the activity is, but we can then help them partner with the right digital health venture. So through that work, we analyze the partnerships quite carefully of the digital health ventures with enterprise and with other organizations. And the distribution for the first half of the year, there were 227 partnerships announced globally. 20% of those partnerships were in the field of health management solutions. And those are a lot of the IT solutions to help manage EHR systems, to help manage hospitals, clinics, and similar offices or IT solutions. 13% of the partnerships were with patient solutions, including digital therapeutics and disease management. 12% were in the field of research, and 11% were in telemedicine. Right, 136 partnerships were in the US, leaving more than 90 partnerships outside of the US as well, including Canada. So it's important to see that ventures are getting their solutions, they're partnering in order to bring solutions onto the market, and a lot of times they're partnering to get clinical data and to get regulatory approvals. Okay, now we're going to jump into investment trends because the first half of 2021 was so exceptional with investment. It tends to be what's on the top of everyone's mind at the moment. So let's talk about it too, and I want to take you through the what you see here, the graphics you see here. In particular, we talked about North America and that $15 billion of funding that was distributed within the North American region. Now that's broken down at the bar chart at the top into different quarters. And what we see is throughout 2017, 18, and 19, there was variation quarter to quarter, but steady growth in digital health. 2020, as you know, the pandemic hit the United States, or it hit North America at the end of Q1. So Q1 has quite normal distribution of funding. And Q2, then you have the shock of the pandemic hit most of the population, and there's a reduction in funding, which isn't quite a surprise. But at the end, as you come out of Q2, then people are turning to digital tools. They're turning to telemedicine, home healthcare with remote monitoring devices, and a lot of digital health tools are being used in Q2. You have a spike in teleconsultation, and investors start to take notice. And it's clear that the future of medicine all of a sudden has been pushed, accelerated by 3 or 4 years, and digital health is taking a hold of the industry, right? So by the Q3, you see the line bar for 2020, there was a almost doubling from Q2 to Q3 in the amount of funding in digital health. This is, again, venture funding in digital health, right? And that level of digital health funding remained for Q4, and that has increased for Q1 of this year and increased again for Q2 of this year. All right, so you had this huge momentum starting Q3, starting to build up, and has just continued, has started the ball rolling, and it's just rolling faster and faster as we end Q2 of this year. So it's exciting to see. And you talk about, okay, is it hype or is it not a hype? Well, if you look in the bottom right-hand corner at the distribution of value deployed as in the series funding, right? And how far the venture is in their growth and in their funding. What you see for the United States is that you have a very healthy distribution of funding across the different of the funding series. That with the series D and beyond receiving the most funding, because at that series you need more funding for a venture, and the ticket size for the series D and beyond funding tends to be much higher. Ticket size gets lower for series C, as you see, B and series A, of course, the least amount of funding, but the number of funding deals is likely not reducing. In addition, in the United States, you see a healthy amount of early stage funding going into seed funding rounds or pre-A funding rounds, which means that you not only have very mature ventures, but you also have a healthy pipeline of young ventures coming into the ecosystem. So that looks great. Canada, on the other hand, is a much less mature market. We saw that there's less funding being deployed in Canada, but that's clear from the fact that that funding is going into Series A and Series B rounds, and therefore the ticket size is much lower. And Canada, the digital health ecosystem is growing, but it is not nearly as mature as the ecosystem in the US. But they have a very healthy pipeline, and we look forward to seeing the ventures that are coming out. North America quickly makes up and has consistently made up around 33 to 38% of the digital health ecosystem globally. Right. Now, we're talking about which funding rounds the higher funding rounds requiring more funding and higher ticket sizes, and that's evident if you look at here from 2017 to through the first half of 2021, quarter by quarter. The straight line without the dots in it is representing the ticket size, how big the funding amount is per deal. And you see that funding increasing with some variation, but increasing quarter on quarter through 2020. And in the bubbles, you see that's the number of deals remaining relatively constant through Q1 of 2021, right? Through Q3 2020 to Q1 2021, we saw a jump, as you see here in the green bars, a jump in the value of funding, but the number of funding deals remains relatively constant, which means that the ticket size shown by the black bar here is increasing. You're funding the Series C, Series D funding rounds. The ventures becoming more mature, they need more funding, and that's what you see here in this bar chart with the bubbles. Now, Q2 in 2021 was an anomaly. The number of deals increased by almost 30%, right? So that is definitely a jump and something to keep an eye on for the Q3, Q4, and that's a huge jump in the number of deals going into digital health ventures in North America. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with that, if the number of deals remains at an elevated level, or whether or not that comes down for the second half of the year. So funding is fun to talk about, and that's what's on a lot of people's minds, I think, when they think of digital health in H1. But I'm going to show you then how you can break down that funding, segment it a little bit differently to gain different insights in what's really going on in the ecosystem. Galen Growth has a very strict taxonomy. This is how we cluster, how we categorize what we mean by digital health, right? We have 17 different clusters, which is what you see in the colored boxes, are different clusters, and those clusters are broken down into typically 3 to 4 categories, right? Taking the upper left-hand health management solutions as an example, these I mentioned before are the management systems used for electronic health records, hospital pharmacy, physician, or clinics, including prescriptive analytics to help manage patients and manage different digital health tools. Right? If you take one level down, patient solutions, looking at digital therapeutics, disease management, patient self-diagnosis. So this is how we look at digital health. And we use this then to segment the market and understand what's going on with that. Now, looking at the digital health funding for the first half of the year, the most funded clusters were research, patient solutions, health management solutions, medical diagnostic, and wellness. The top 5 recorded about 60% of the total funding raised in H1 2021. And as mentioned, research was the top most funded cluster in the United States, followed by patient solutions, which are digital therapeutics, disease management, among many others. We've talked about the health management solutions, diagnostics we've also mentioned as far as diagnostic tools. So keep that in mind, and I'm going to show you then, look at this heat map may be a bit overwhelming at first, but the legend, looking at the blue or the lower number of deals in this particular cluster, the green, a higher number of deals. So if you go all the way to the right to 2021, you'll see that the green boxes represent the clusters with the most deals in 2021. And the darkest green is at the very top with health management solutions. And that is not surprising, because although health management solutions did not receive the most amount of funding, remember that was in research, health management solutions is the largest cluster in North America. So as the largest cluster, they're also seeing the largest volume of venture funding deals. And following that same logic, patient solutions is the second largest cluster, and they're seeing the second amount, or second largest amount of deals. Now, as we mentioned, research was the top funded cluster, received the most amount of funding, and research here goes somewhere in the middle, but the number of deals is much lower than some of the other categories. And there's a reason for that. And that's because if you look at the venture, that's because of the venture maturity in research, right? Galen Growth rates each venture on their venture maturity, considering the venture momentum, how fast they're getting funding, how fast they're putting products on the market, looking at an innovation index, looking at a market index, and a funding index, right? And this is the way we have our own proprietary algorithm to calculate what we consider to be the maturity of a particular venture. Now, in the heat map, the maturity score is on the left, going the highest maturity is on the bottom, the lower maturity is on the top, with some categories that we've put there to help you understand a little bit about our maturity scoring. And the depth or the darkness of the green is on the venture volumes. We're looking at the number of ventures here and how mature those ventures are, or where the largest volume of ventures in a particular maturity category, right? So again, health management solutions, patient solutions are the most popular ventures, right? Most have the highest volume of ventures in those categories, so they're the darker green. But if we take health management solutions, there's quite a normal distribution of ventures there. And I've calculated the average alpha score, and the average here is 59.4 for the average alpha score in this particular category, right? You can see that patient solutions would have a slightly lower average alpha score. The highest alpha score, telemedicine has a double peak, so it's hard to calculate there, but I've calculated, again, the highest maturity score you'll see. Although research doesn't have the most volume of ventures, it has the highest maturity of ventures. The average maturity of ventures in the research cluster is a little bit more than 60, right? And what's interesting though in research is that there's not a tail. You don't see that pipeline of ventures that you see in perhaps patient solutions and health management solutions. The research ventures are clustered at a relatively high maturity score. And that then goes to explain why, although research has fewer ventures, those ventures are at a higher maturity and therefore commanding oftentimes higher ticket sizes for their funding deals. So now looking at therapeutic focus areas, right? Because we focus on digital health, we can then break the ventures down and help classify the ventures as to their therapeutic focus areas. And if the number one headline in the first half of the year was on the amount of funding in digital health, the number two headline was the highest funded therapeutic focus area. And that headline said, for the first time in at least 5 years, oncology was no longer the top funded therapeutic focus area. Which is quite amazing. So the bars here, you see the last 4 years, these are the total annual funding, total yearly funding, and then 2021 is the first half funding only. So of course the numbers are lower because it's only half year funding, but oncology has been at the top of the therapeutic focus areas for many years. You see going always remaining above $1 billion, almost reaching $2 billion in many years. And this year, mental health and cardiovascular diseases have both exceeded the funding in oncology. Mental health, probably not a big surprise, since there's an increasing focus on mental health, and an increasing number of ventures are working hard to solve the challenges right now in mental health. Mental health has gone from, in 2017, to probably about 15% of the ventures early stage, 30% of the ventures being Series A or below. And those ventures have increasingly matured to what you see now is more than 50% of the ventures in mental health are receiving funding in a Series D and beyond funding stage, right? So that's the big headline, is that mental health and cardiovascular diseases have overtaken oncology. And there's a big focus on that area for digital health ventures. So now we're going to deep dive quickly. Our research report has 4 deep dives for the top 2 therapeutic focus areas, as well as the top 2 digital health clusters. We're going to focus on just mental health and research today. I encourage you to open the report and look at the other 2 clusters, or the other therapeutic focus areas in the other cluster. Okay, so deep diving into mental health. Within North America, 10% of the ventures offer solutions in the field of digital health. So there's a large volume of ventures, 10% of the volume of ventures, and those ventures, 82% are in the US, 18% are in Canada. So right. So Canada has a large focus on mental health as well. And there's a huge growth of ventures in digital health, although it's decreasing, which is very typical. We saw a boom of digital health ventures in 2016, 2017. There are less new ventures coming on, but 18% is still an incredible growth rate for ventures in this area. And as we saw before, these ventures are focusing more on the later funding rounds, which that Series D and beyond has been increasing as far as the volume share over the past 5 years significantly. Right, 2.2% of the funding has gone to Canadian ventures, the other 97.8% to the US, and of that, the majority of the ventures are located in Canada. One spotlight that we have is on Cerebral, because they're one of the highest funded deals in the first half of the year. And Cerebral is, as mentioned before, focusing on teleconsultation, focusing on anxiety, depression, addressing those mental health needs that we hear about in the news, and the increasing focus on getting people help. And digital health is just a prime candidate to help in this growing mental health crisis. Okay, next, jump into the research category. Now, research was the highest funded category in the first half of the year, with a total funding of $1.87 billion. Right, 11%. Well, 11% of the ventures are focused here on are in North America, focused on research, with 9% in Canada and 91% in the US. Again, just to give you a comparison with the mental health, we saw 25%, 18% growth. Here you have a much lower growth rate of the ventures, and we saw that as well in the maturity, that you have very few ventures in the pipeline at a low maturity, new ventures coming on in the research field, but many very more mature ventures in this space. And the highest funding round in the first half of the year was for in vitro. It was a $400 million funding raise. In the first half of the year, they're focused on drug discovery, right, in the research category. For research, again, the bulk of the value is focused on the growth and late stage funding deals. Okay, and again, 60% of those ventures are located in California, with Massachusetts taking the next largest piece of the pie at 19%. Okay, as I mentioned before, keeping an eye on the clock, we're going to skip over the noteworthy deals, but I very much encourage you to look over those in our report. And I'm going to end in kind of the headline of the year in the large funding events. January of this year saw a really unprecedented flurry of M&A. The amount of mergers and acquisitions in digital health was really quite astounding in January, but that has settled down significantly as the months went on. What has remained are the SPAC deals, which really the SPAC deals were a big deal across basically the entire ecosystem, right? It wasn't just digital health. SPACs, there was an explosion of SPACs at the beginning of the year, but that's settled down largely in most of the other sectors. But in digital health, you see, you never saw an explosion. It's constant, and it has remained, that constant has remained through the first half of the year, right? The IPOs as well have remained relatively constant, with some months higher than others, right? What we talked about and what I'll leave you with on the last note are the volume of mega deals. A mega deal is a deal that's greater than 100 million. And that mega deal trend really started in Q3 of 2020 and has just exploded throughout 2021, right? North America saw 63 mega deals total in the first half of the year, with more in the second quarter as the first quarter. And with ventures maturing and remaining and keeping to mature until they, of course, have the exit event, we'll continue to see the mega deals, I think, through the rest of 2021. Okay, so it's an exciting time to be in digital health, and I appreciate you joining us. If you have any questions, let us know, and I look forward to showing you the results of the second half of the year at the beginning of January next year. Okay, thank you very much. Julian, back to you for the Q&A.
Thank you, Sarah. Q&A, we will manage according to the number of questions there going through. One of the questions was, what do we expect to see by the end of the year? I have had this conversation a few times now, particularly in view of the record busting funding levels we're seeing coming out of the USA. If we look at the USA, it's probably not uncommon to get into a conversation with experts who believe that this funding level will, and I'm excluding IPO, M&A, and SPACs from this conversation, but that funding will probably increase by another 50%, if not possibly higher. So it's probably not too crazy to see total funding in the USA for digital health exceeding the 30 billion mark this year. We'll see. The key drivers that most of the experts in the USA are attributing to this, I guess, performance to date, but also performance going forwards, is the fact that, of course, we're seeing, an excess financial market liquidity, and that's, of course, impacting all sectors and all financial instruments. But VC is seeing the same sort of frothiness, as say, or ebullience. In the US particularly, there's talk of capital gains rate hikes. So I think that's motivating people to get into deals prior to those rate hikes if they come through coming in. But one of the big drivers that we should not dismiss really now that we have had COVID driving that momentum is the fact that the investment thesis for digital health is clearly set out now, and we are seeing substantial amount of funding attracted into digital health. And as Sarah showed you where that money is going, we should continue to see the same trends going forwards over the next 6 months. We shouldn't lose sight, of course, there's an awful lot of FOMO going on. As you've seen from some of the SPAC activity, I think a lot of people are trying to step into these deals before they run away on them. But of course, with that amount of funding and liquidity and interest, there's an awful lot of sellers or certainly ventures and their owners looking for deals. So I think those four, in the USA alone, certainly those four drivers are going to continue pumping the VC funding into digital health and no doubt IPO, M&A, and SPAC. And we'll see some of those trends driving the same sort of ebullience in other regions, in Canada and Western Europe, to name two. So that will be our point of view in relation to where we see the USA landing at the end of the year. Sarah, there are no other questions beyond that one. So we'll probably wrap up today and let everyone get on with their day. Just to say that this is one of 4 reports published on a biannual basis. So this is the US. My colleagues in Asia Pacific presented Asia Pac a week ago, and we will be presenting the Western Europe report at the end of August, on the 26th of August. So either subscribe to be notified or stay tuned for some of our promotion of this event on LinkedIn. Feel free to send us any questions you have on this report that you come think of after we have closed out the webinar. And of course, feel free to download the reports. As I said earlier on, we are expecting to include Latin America as our 5th region at the end of the year. So as Sarah rightly pointed out, our year-end reports on the regional ecosystems will include Latin America as well as North America, Europe, the Middle East, and Asia Pacific. So on that note, I'll thank you all very much for your time. Thank you, Sarah, for your insights. It's always difficult to bring so much data down to a few salient points, but I hope that it will address a number of questions that our participants have had on the tip of their tongue as they read our report. This is recorded, so a recording will be made available to all our registrants and participants so they can share, but also, I guess, review in their own time. So thank you very much and have a great day.
Julian, bye.